Sorry, there's some background noise here today. So we'll just get started. I'm just going to give a few more minutes for people to join in. Just grab I know I mentioned this before, but do grab a piece of paper and a pen in case, because we will be doing a couple of exercises. I'd like to make this as participative as possible. I encourage you guys to raise your hand or participate in the chat box. We're a small enough group today that we can have a really interactive session, and that also makes it much more fun for everyone. Okay. All right. I know it's early on a Saturday for some, so thank you also for making the time to be here. And maybe one more minute, and we can get started. So, perfect. So we'll get started today. Good morning. My name is Mira Saraf. I am a life coach with Prism Mind. And thank you for making the time to be here. Super excited for today's session. So the reason I wanted to do something like this now, especially this year, is because of where we are. 2020, we all had really big dreams about what we wanted to achieve. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, everything went into standstill. Things started to open again towards the end of 2020. Then 2021, again, we got hit with another wave. So it feels like the start and stop motion keeps happening. And even though there is still a very distinct possibility of a third wave, I think this is a good time to sort of take stock because we can't really control whether there's a third wave or not, but we can actually control a lot of things, a lot more than we realize. And I think this is a good time to set some intentions for the year ahead, especially considering the last 2 years have been so unpredictable. So there was a particular reason this year out of all years I wanted to do this as we approach the end of 2021 with big dreams for 2022, but also a lot of apprehension. So like I said, this will be an interactive session. Please do participate because it makes it more interesting for me too. I get to learn a lot from you guys, as well as you learning from me. All right. So just to move on, I'd like to start with a small exercise. Identifying your top 5 values. So I'm going to share a list of values on the screen. And they include all different types of values. And what I'd like you to do is make a note of your top 5 and just give you a couple of minutes to do that. 1 second, just allow me to share it. All right, can you guys all see this? Just give me a yes or a tick or something if you can hear this. Or see this, sorry, rather. Getting my senses straight this morning. Perfect. Thanks, Shruti. So I'll give you a few minutes and I'd like you guys to just give me a tick mark when you guys are done. Top 5. And preferably figure out the order. I'll explain why I'm doing this shortly. It'll all sort of come together. But yeah, just take your time, figure out which ones resonate the most. Are you guys able to identify which values resonate with you? So I'll give you a few more minutes. All right, so I'm not sure if you guys are able to identify top 5 values. Just let me know how you're doing with it. Perfect. Shruti, Rushang, Shruti's done, Mona's done. Just waiting on a few others. Anyone want to share what they came up with? Fitness is top for Mona. Perfect. Perfect. Sandhya is also done. Family, humanity, success, kindness, gratitude. Those are beautiful, Rushang. Fantastic, fantastic values. Varsha's done as well. Perfect. Courage is at the top for Shruti. Amazing, Shruti. Amazing. So if I can share mine as well, creativity, integrity, diversity, generosity, and learning. Those are my 5. And these are individual. There's no right or wrong for anyone, right? And while your priorities can change, a lot of your core values do stay pretty static throughout the course of your life. So definitely good to have some sharing in here. So I'll just go back to the presentation. We'll come back to this a little bit later, but keep this handy because this is going to come useful to us later in the presentation. So I'm just going to go back to my presentation. Thank you for participating. And if anyone didn't get to finish, just let me know and I can put it up again at some point soon. So just want to start off with a thought that before identifying what we want to do for the next year, it's often helpful to take a step back, go back to the basics, understand the bigger questions about, and I think that's something that the pandemic really encouraged us to do. I mean, it maybe didn't encourage us, sometimes it forced us to do it. But if there are silver linings, it's that the pandemic had this impact on all of us that we had to take a step back, we had to pause what we were doing and really reflect on where we wanted to go. So how many of you have a sense of your sense of purpose? Anyone want to share? It took me a long time. I think in the last 2 years, probably I understood it because I made a lot of big changes in terms of what I do. But I would love to hear from you guys if, you understand. Kavita says sometimes yes, but sometimes confused. Perfect. It's okay. It's okay. It can evolve. Your understanding of who you are and who you want to be can evolve. Anyone else want to share? Give it a minute. All right. Perfect. We'll just move on. So why do our lives need meaning? And why do our lives need purpose? So anyone who's read Ikigai will be a little familiar with what I'm going to talk about. But, the psychologist Viktor Frankl, He was the founder of logotherapy, and he argued that humans need a purpose to live. All right. They need a driving force, something that is propelling them forward. One of the first questions he would ask his patients is, why don't you kill yourself? And this seems a little harsh, but it actually is the fundamental question. What keeps you waking up in the morning? What keeps you going? What keeps you trying? Right? So these are questions, I mean, that is why we need to understand what our meaning for living is and what our purpose is. He actually was a Nazi prison camp survivor. And he argued because his sense of purpose helped him survive through, I mean, the Nazi prison camps were tremendous ordeals. And so to be able to survive that was no small feat. And he argued that people could deal with almost any how if they knew their why. They knew why they were doing something. So that is something that's really, really important and keeps us going. How many of us truly understand our why? And it's something that, you know, sometimes we forget. Oftentimes we get caught up in these social pressures of life, and we often forget why we're here and why we're doing this. So I'm just going to spend some time talking about this concept, which is one of my favorite concepts in the world. It was introduced to me by my mentor, and Mona, you also have seen this, I'm sure. The concept of Ikigai is basically a combination, that sweet spot between what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. Okay, and this, I think, you know, deserves, I mean, there's a lot of sort of wisdom out there that talks about follow your passion. You should love what you do. You should really do something you're truly, you know, committed to. And this is, and so it sort of tends to, and that's not bad advice, but it sort of tends to oversimplify things, because often our passion, once we make it into a profession, it stops becoming a labor of love, right? Because it starts becoming something that we're relying on sustenance for. And my love is writing, for example. Writing, I mean, across the world is known not to be a great thing to be paid for, right? And so following your passion, when you actually start following your passion, first thing is that it stops becoming a passion. The second thing is that a lot of our passions are not things that we can be paid a lot of money for. And no matter what, we still need to survive. We need our base things taken. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need our safety, our food, our basic needs taken care of in order to sort of get into that space where we can appreciate the art we're creating, or we can appreciate something we're doing just for the love of it. So having actually something that focuses on what does the world need and what can you be paid for, along with what you love and what you're good at, actually brings a lot of additional nuances into the concept, right? So how many of you are familiar with the Ikigai concept? Anyone? Somebody just put up their hands. Yes, Mona would have seen it. Rushang as well. Perfect. Perfect. Shruti. Amazing. So this is, you know, I'm showing this sort of as a reminder to all of us. Kavita, it's the first time. That's perfect. So, you know, it's when we think about our why, we think about our purpose. It's really helpful to think about what is that thing that is that sweet spot between all of these four elements: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. So have you ever been so immersed in something that you completely lost track of time? Happens to me when I'm writing. Sometimes I forget to eat if I'm really, really immersed in it, or if I'm creating something, Sometimes even when I'm creating content, it happens. I lose track of time and I get into this zone where I just want to keep going. Has anyone ever experienced this while doing red research? Perfect. Very often, Mona. Perfect. Yes, yes. Research, anything, you get into the zone and you just feel like you can keep going and you're completely focused. You're completely 100% present. Yes, when facilitating or coaching. Perfect, Shruti. So this state is called flow. And again, if you're familiar with the Ikigai concept, you would be familiar with flow as well. Coined by psychologist Mihaly, okay, I cannot pronounce that name, but flow is an experience you're completely immersed in, like I mentioned. The idea is to increase our time spent in flow, or increase our time spent on activities that bring us into a state of flow. We often find ourselves in flow when we do what we are most passionate about. So it can be art, it can be sports, it can be games, it can be coaching, it can be research, it can be anything we do that we absolutely love and we just get into the zone. I think that's how sort of people refer to it casually, in the zone. I'm in the zone, I'm completely focused in what I'm doing. So what activities, I mean, some of you answered what activities give you that feeling of flow. So what I want to know is, how will you increase your flow in 2022? If you think of those activities that give you that feeling, do you have any plans in terms of how you could increase it, or any idea? So for me, I'm going to spend more time writing. I'm wrapping up a distance learning program, hopefully in the next few months. So I'm going to definitely spend more time writing, more time reading, reading for fun, not reading direct taxation, which is what I've been reading. Not the same sort of flow feeling for sure, but very good information. So anyone? While creating content and reading more books to do that. Perfect, Shruti. That's amazing. So great, great, great. So I'll leave you guys to think about this and make a note. I mean, you don't have to share everything on here as well. You can make a note and make a note to yourself as well. So now we're going to do a little exercise. I'd like you to picture yourself at 85 years old. And I told you the session is going to be very interactive. So do play along and hopefully we can come to something sort of productive by the end of this session. You're writing yourself a letter, your younger self a letter, telling yourself how proud you are for what you've accomplished. What are the top 5 things you're most proud of? So I'm going to participate in this with you. What you achieved? Yeah. So Kavita, what have you achieved by 85? If you can imagine it. Independency in my thoughts in life. Perfect. That's amazing. That's amazing. And that actually is, I mean, I'll come to it later, but it's there's something about that particular thing that is really relates to something I'm going to talk about shortly. Perseverance, so Sandhya, success, giving back to society, Yushang, amazing, amazing. Any others I want to share? Okay. And just patience. Perfect. Yeah. So there are a couple of interesting things in what you guys are sharing, which is amazing. Can you identify sort of a broad purpose from this? And this is just a question I'm going to throw out, and I don't need you to answer it right now. Just have it at the back of your mind, because we're going to go on and do a couple more exercise-like things, and then we'll move on from there. Then you'll hear a lot more of me talking after that. So another little exercise. So what are your top 5 strengths? Love and respect. So just note them down. If you want to share them on here, of course, please do. But just let me know when you're done. I know I'm working you guys very hard on a Saturday morning, right? I'm a good listener. I'm patient. I empower people. Very good, Shruti. Yeah, and I think those are bang on from what I know about you. Commitment, love to explore things, patience. Any others? So I have empathy, patience, perfect, Mona. I can see that from what I've seen of how you operate and your energy. So perfect. Anyone else? Is everyone else done? If you don't want to share, that's okay as well. But just want to make sure that you're not rushed. So mine are integrity, creativity, empathy, as well, intuition and learning. I love to learn. It's kind of a problem at times. Perfect. So I'm going to go on to the next one. And forgive me if somebody needs more time, then do let me know if I'm rushing you. Don't want to, but just because a couple of the people are done, they can actually move on. What problems can these strengths solve? And again, this is something I'd like you to note down, along where you put your values, along where you put your strengths, your top 5 things you're proud of. Help people lead the life they want. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any others that want to share? Getting irritated on small things. So we want to see what problems. Oh, okay, so you want to get patients to not get irritated at small things. Yeah, yeah, perfect. And it's good, it's good that to recognize that as well, you know. Any others that want to share? I'll get on to the next thing. So if we look at your top 5 personal values, just keep that in mind as well. And what elements that are sort of involved in these give you that state of flow. And perhaps already you've made the connection because a couple of you talked about what got you into flow before. So for me, sometimes it's facilitating as well, like Shruti, but it's also writing stories that or writing things that open people's minds, right? Whether it's nonfiction or fiction. So that for me is what helps. Anyone want to share anything that's sort of coming up for them right now? We're almost done the hard work portion. So, and just something again to keep at the back of your mind, you know, how can you use all of these things, your values, your strengths, your things that you want to achieve, the feeling of flow, you know, what activities get you in the feeling of flow. How can you use these to change the world? So at the end of the day, I think that's something that we all want. We all want to leave the world a better place than what we found it. Correct? So I'll let you guys stew over that for a bit. So when we write a mission or a vision, and if you don't want to do it right now, that's also okay. Because I know I've already made you guys work very hard on a Saturday morning when you thought you were coming to listen. But I think it's important to actually participate, because if you just hear me speak for an hour, hour and a half, then you know you may remember, you may not remember, and at least I'd like to get your minds going on, you know, on once you've written all these down. Even if you don't come out of this with a mission or a vision, it's somewhere at the back of your mind, it's working, right? And this is actually an element, and I'm creating a course right now on planned procrastination, but it's an element of planned procrastination. When we do anything creative, like writing a personal mission or a vision, we need to get started on it and sort of get some ideas going, and slowly over time our subconscious it keeps working on it, and suddenly we have it, right? So a lot of creativity happens in your subconscious once it's sort of the bug is planted in there, if that makes sense. So look at everything you've written down and identify a broad theme for all the elements. And you can just make a note of this if you don't want to do it right now, that's quite all right. But try and figure out what the broad theme is. What is the thing that is sort of overlapping most or all of these things? There's no right answer. It is different for everyone. Sometimes it evolves for people over time as their circumstances change, as they grow, as they learn. And you can summarize into the following format, and I would recommend that you write this down, although you know, I also can share it with you if you miss it, but I will, and then it's whatever you will do, it's an action for the person you're going to do it for, the people you're going to do it for, the population you're going to do it for. So it could be people, it could be animals, it could be for the environment, it could be anyone. And sorry, my Adobe Flash keeps coming up. Do this for by skills to result. So I will action for target by using these skills to create this result. Everyone got that? I'll just type it in here. So So it's in the chat box now. So if you need to note it down and sort of think about it, try to keep it to one sentence. And the reason being is that ideally you want to be able to recall or recollect your mission or vision statement at any given point in time. I would recommend also, once you do formulate a vision statement or a mission statement, you keep it somewhere that you can see it, right? Either on your desktop or on your phone, or on your desk somewhere where you see it every day, and or you have an alarm that pops up. And there's a lot of different things we can actually use technology to help us remind us of these things, right? So try and keep it brief, and try and put it somewhere also where you can see it. So the reason I did all of these exercises is, see, this is a time that we want to be able to take stock. So we want to see how we can work towards our vision in 2022. If this is where I want to get to, this is my mission in life, this is what I want to do with myself, what my presence on earth is for, what my why is. What steps what portion of that journey can we make in 2022? That you would get to December 2022 and say, you know what, I moved this much closer to my mission, and I'm really satisfied with my progress. It's just a question we have to ask ourselves. And like I said, the reason it's useful to do this now is because the pandemic has sort of changed our perspective in so many different ways, and in different ways for all of us, because everyone went through something slightly different. Sometimes circumstances forced us to consider other alternatives. Other times, just sort of that helplessness and that feeling of, particularly I think during the second wave, something that I saw a lot of was people feeling not sure what to do with themselves. If you weren't directly impacted, and seeing all the suffering around you, it sort of changes your perspective on the world and changes your perspective on life. So that's why I took you guys through this exercise, to kind of revisit our why, and how our why might have changed post the entry of COVID into our lives. So the reason I found some of your goals really interesting is that you want to be able to set goals on who you want to be. A lot of goals are set based on achieving things, right? But a couple of things I saw were things that, I want to have patience, love, empathy. These things are actually setting goals on becoming. We often set goals on getting things, but rarely on becoming. And I would say the population here is very different, and that makes me really happy, because that's one hurdle you've already climbed. The truth is that growth can only happen when we become. The satisfaction of acquiring things is often less permanent. So if we ever think, I want this, we ever covet something that's an object, we want to be able to buy this thing, or we want to be able to get this thing, we want to be able to achieve XYZ, that actual getting of the thing doesn't give us a permanent sense of satisfaction because we get used to it. But evolution, gradual growth, that is something that gives us lasting satisfaction, because we can look back and see at who we were and what kind of person we were, and get from that point, how we got from that point to the point we are today, and how we will get from this point to the point we'll be in the future. So that is something, and it's very tied with the idea of having a personal mission, the idea of wanting to touch the world in some small way. And it doesn't have to be through grand acts of charity or anything like that. It could be through very, very small things. And it could be through different kinds of means, even through businesses that are not related directly to helping people. For example, we run a medical transcription company in a sister concern that feeds 150 families, right? 150 families depend on their livelihood for that. And it's an industry that's stagnated, but we keep it going so that those families have a living, right? Because it just feels like if we can do that little bit for them, then they can sustain themselves a little bit longer. So even things like that can be impacting the world. Often material goals require us to become rather than to get. So we have to ask ourselves when we're looking even at material goals, who do we need to be to actually achieve that? So I'm sure most of you would be familiar with the SMART goals thing. So and SMART goals have different meanings for the acronyms in probably every school of management thought. So I picked a very generic one. Anyone not familiar with SMART goals? So while I wait for you to answer, I'll just take you through it quickly. If most of you are familiar. So generally it means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So specific, we need to know exactly what the goal is. Measurable, we need to be able to measure it. So saying that I want to become more spiritual may not be the most measurable goal, but what does becoming more spiritual mean, right? What does it mean? You're going to spend more time meditating? Does it mean you're going to spend, you're going to do a particular course, you're going to acquire a particular skill, you're going to go do a retreat somewhere? What does that mean? And how are you putting that into your life? Achievable means that it has to be something that is possible. It has to be, for example, flying to the moon, not the most achievable goal because it's actually not possible unless you are, in one of those space race, I think now they're Elon Musk and all that, they're doing the space travel, but for most of us, it's not really, not really achievable yet. Realistic. So for example, Shruti and I had a participant who wanted to lose 15 kilos in 3 months. That's a lot. It could be if you do, I mean, it's not that it's impossible, but when you look at everything considered, is it a realistic goal? So we want to be able to make sure that what we're setting is realistic, because what happens if it's unrealistic, we get demotivated. Even if we know it's unrealistic, we get demotivated. And time bound, so it has to have an end date. We need to have a deadline. So I think probably most of you are familiar with this, so I won't spend too much more time on this. So this increases your chances of success, having SMART goals. So I want to spend some time talking about the circle of concern and the circle of influence. So the circle of concern is what I cannot control. And I made this actually, I made this by hand, this little diagram. But if you look at the things in our world today, COVID, vaccinations, hospital beds, the weather, the rupee, the economy going down, the economy going up, heartbreak when it's done by other people, baseball, cricket, any sports teams, what's happening in the world around us, whether we have fever or not, what other people do, and whether, again, it's another COVID reference. So this is just a small subset of things we cannot control, right? There are infinite number of things that influence us that we cannot control. And it's important to understand this, because when we're setting goals, we want to make sure that as much as possible is within our circle of influence, but I can control. Even then, not 100% will be in your control. We don't know yet if there's going to be a third wave. We don't know yet if there are going to be more lockdowns. We don't know yet what's going to happen next year, the year after. So we can only control that small subset, what's in our hearts, our goals, what we do, what we say, what we think. What we think is a kind of an iffy one sometimes, because sometimes we can't control what we think, but we can actually influence our thoughts to a great extent possible. And I just put the dessert in there for fun. But how much cake we eat. But the point is that we have to look at, when we're setting these goals, we have to look at what it is we can control. And it's not that we discard the rest of it, but we acknowledge the possibility that things could not go our way. And we accept it. We can't control everything. And so when we look at why we don't achieve things, we have to look at, was it within my control or was it outside of my control? And be ready to take that responsibility when it is something that, I didn't do. And be willing to sort of forgive it or forgive myself for that. And also acknowledge the fact that there were certain things in the situation that I couldn't control. So when we're setting goals, we're looking ahead to 2022. This concept is really important to remember because there are going to be a lot of things out of our control still. And it's unfortunate, but it is the reality of the situation. And I think if we're prepared for it, we can handle it better when the time comes. So moving on, I'm going to talk about motivation a little bit. So there are three basic types of motivation. One is extrinsic. So this is the reward and punishment model used a lot by command and control type organizations. Forces people to do things they don't want to do, right? So it's generally not great for motivation by itself. And I'll clarify that in a minute. Second is goal-based. So now, I mean, I know I just asked you to submit SMART goals and everything, but these SMART goals, I'll distinguish this in a minute. When it's purely goal-based, it does drive people forward and achievement brings joy. But thanks to something called hedonic adaptation, people do get used to their accomplished goals. So last year's accomplishment is like, by this year, you've gotten used to it. So that doesn't drive you forward anymore. It doesn't motivate you anymore. Goal-based can work in combination with intrinsic. So intrinsic is always propelled by personal meaning and purpose. The most powerful type of motivation is intrinsic motivation because you're not relying on anything from the outside. In extrinsic, you need that reward and punishment outside of you to motivate you to do something. In goal-based also, because the goal is external to you. It may be your personal goal, but then it sort of becomes like an intrinsic goal, intrinsic motivation. So when it's an external goal, you still don't have that sense. You still need the goal to be there. When it's within you, that is really powerful because everything you need then is within yourself. However, I would not discard extrinsic motivation quite yet. So they had this study of elementary school children, and they discovered that extrinsic motivation can boost intrinsic motivation. Now, what they found is that they divided the class into two groups. And one group watched a motivational video and had a discussion with the facilitator, and the other group didn't. And then they brought the two groups together and mixed them. And then they were asked to tell a creative story. Now, half of the group, not necessarily the same half, same groups, but one group was given a reward or offered a reward for telling a creative story, and the other group was not. So predictably, the people who had not seen the motivational video and just got the reward, they did not tell creative stories. However, the group that had watched the motivational video, had the discussion with the facilitator, and been offered a reward, told the most creative stories, more so even than their peers that were not offered the reward. So what that tells us is that extrinsic motivation in combination with intrinsic motivation can be a much more powerful force. Rewards that make us feel controlled, manipulated, or coerced stunt us. If we say that we are being forced into doing something and it's a carrot and stick approach, that's not motivating. But when we combine the extrinsic motivation with intrinsic motivation, if it's offered in a straightforward, upfront way, it can actually enhance it. And so if you think about anyone who's ever worked in a company and loves what they do, yes, they have intrinsic motivation to keep them going, but getting a bonus at Diwali, for example, or Christmas or whatever time of the year you get a bonus, it boosts that, right? It does give you that extra bit of satisfaction. And so that is an example how extrinsic motivation can actually bolster up intrinsic motivation. So once we've set our goals and we have sort of gathered, understood the type of motivation we need, and we understand that, especially if our goals are made by us, intrinsic motivation, and they're related to our vision and what we want to do in the world, intrinsic motivation is much more natural, right? Whether or not it's enhanced by extrinsic motivation, we don't know. It's going to depend on the situation, and it's going to depend on your individual goals. But once you set your goals, you have to be able to plan and track them. So using affirmations and visualizations to form a clear picture of what you want to achieve. So just like we have our vision statement, and I made you do that exercise about being 85 years old and what you're proud of. For each of your goals, if you have a picture of what achieving that goal is going to look like, it's actually going to enhance your motivation to work towards that goal, because you can picture it, and we think in pictures, whether we like it or not. And so as much visual representation as you can make of your own goal, that is going to take you that much further in your journey towards achieving it. Affirmation is a positive statement, and it's a present tense statement. I am doing this. I am already this. And what that does is, when we have doubts, the doubts can lie deep in our subconscious. Sometimes we're not even aware of them. So we need to actually train our mind to believe that we are capable of things, right? So affirmations help in that way. They help actually train our subconscious and enhance our ability of our subconscious to help us achieve our goals. And it sort of keep those doubts at bay. Create a step-by-step plan for achieving it. There are a lot of different tools out there that you can use, but you can, just plain pen and paper is as good as anything. I think in our LMI programs, we use something called a goal tracking sheet or goal planning sheet. But essentially, it's just a plan of how we're going to achieve it. And there's a little bit more you can add into this step-by-step plan, and we'll talk about that probably in a future session. Ensure you track your progress daily or weekly. And it's important to track, right? Once we've set a goal, we've set a plan, we need to constantly be measuring it and seeing how we're doing. And a couple of different things can happen when we track it. We can find out, okay, we're on track, everything's a-okay, moving towards the goal, no issues. We can find out that we are way ahead of ourselves. So we thought we would be at step 2 and we're at step 6. So maybe the goal was too easy. Or we could find out that the goal is too difficult and that it's not going as we planned. So we wanted to be at step 5, but we're actually at step 2. And that means we've got to modify our goal or give ourselves longer to achieve it. So this constant revisiting and constant tracking will help us keep tabs on this. And it feels like a lot of work at first, but once you make it a habit, it actually becomes quite automatic. So the importance of small milestones. Now, this is something that I really feel that helps me, because I had a situation, I think last year, where I had a lot of long-term goals. And having small milestones really, really helped, and short-term goals as well. While achieving the biggest goals feels amazing, often these take time, right? They're something that can take months, years sometimes. And it's easy to get discouraged, get off track. So with pitfalls, and we do hit pitfalls, no matter how well we plan, there are always things that are going to throw us off. There are always obstacles. There are always, issues that we encounter along the way. And it's easy to get discouraged when we hit those pitfalls if we only have long-term goals. Setting small milestones for yourself on a weekly or monthly basis, or short-term goals, having some of your goals be something you can achieve within a month or 2 months, that will help motivate you to keep going, because it gives you that sense of achievement that I've gotten to here. I've accomplished this. At least this is something I can check off the list. And that actually propels us and gives us energy for the longer term goals. Record all your accomplishments daily or weekly if possible. So this is something I've told a lot of people to do. I've asked a lot of people to do, because often when we're going through life, and especially if we go through a particularly rough patch in our business, in our personal lives, we tend to forget the small things we achieve. Our brains somehow are wired to focus on the negative. Like, okay, I did this and this and this, but I didn't do this one thing, right? So we tend to automatically shift our focus there. And so as we record our accomplishments on an ongoing basis, we remind ourselves of all those things that we are achieving. And that's an important motivator as well. Review this regularly so you don't get discouraged with slow progress. So that is something that can really help you enhance your motivation and enhance your success as well. Dealing with discouragement or failure. So this is important because it is something that happens. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we get discouraged, sometimes we hit pitfalls, sometimes we have to take a different route than we imagined. Forgive yourself if you miss a step. Spend that energy getting back onto track. Don't beat yourself up. The reason is, there's a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's just generally not very healthy to beat yourself up, but we use a lot of energy when we're beating ourselves up. We use a lot of energy that could be used to get ourselves back on track, right? So we want to make sure that let's say you've started with a new workout plan in the new year and you skip one day, second week of January. Rather than thinking, why didn't I go that one day? You go the next day, right? Use that energy to get back into it and try and sort of correct the problem or correct the issue as soon as possible. It's all right if the goal goes off course. Just get it back on track. This happens with a lot of goals. We think when we're planning that nothing could go wrong. But unfortunately, things happen. And sometimes things happen that are outside your control, if you remember the COC concept. So you want to make sure to get back on track. Repetitive use of affirmations and visualizations can keep you motivated. So I'll just give you some parting thoughts before I take for questions. Goal setting is much more meaningful when we relate it to our purpose. And so the reason I did that whole exercise with you, and I know I worked you guys hard, I'm sorry, is because I want you to walk away with something from this session, right? And it doesn't have to be complete. It doesn't have to be that you've got all of 2022 figured out, but I wanted to get you guys thinking about yourselves, your own lives. So at least you take something from this and you can sort of start that journey, right? And that's what I would want for you. That's what I would want for anyone who attends the session. Motivation is tricky, but the important thing is not to get discouraged. Build that intrinsic motivation. Build that intrinsic motivation from relating goals to your purpose and from relating everything back to your overall journey, your overall why. Keep at it and you will achieve your dreams in 2022. Don't sweat the stuff you can't control, just work around it. And oftentimes that will mean that you take a different route, right, than you originally planned, and that's okay. So we are doing a follow-up workshop to this. This is something, if any of you have sort of gotten some stuff together today and you want to do work more on your goals and goal setting, goal planning, Shruti, who's our my amazing coach in Prism Mind, she's hosting this session. Date yet to be finalized. It's going to be about 2 hours and price is $9.99 plus GST. All you need is an open mind and you can take some of your notes from today. So we'll be sharing more about that over the email. So I want to open it up for questions now, and hopefully if I can figure out how to unmute you, you can just ask the question out loud. So is there anyone who wants to ask a question? And did I overwhelm you guys with a lot of it? I know it was a lot of information today. Anything? All right. Thanks, Shruti. Glad it was helpful. Glad it was helpful. Anyone else? Parting questions, thoughts? I will ask you to take a short survey at the end that will pop up as you exit. Honest feedback is great. You're most welcome, Mona. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad it was helpful. All right. So what I'll do is I will close the session for now. And you're most welcome, Rishang. I'm glad it was helpful. I'm glad it was helpful. And very happy 2022 to all of you. I hope you achieve all of your dreams. Really excited to have shared this all with you and share the space with you. All right. Have a great Saturday. Thank you so much for joining in.